Planning Board meeting will come to order. The meeting of the Planning Board, Borough of Somerville for November 10th, 2021 will please come to order. Adequate notice of this meeting as required by the Open Public Meeting Act has been provided, and a copy of the notice specifying the date, time, and location was 1, posted on the bulletin board outside of Borough Hall, 2, mailed, faxed, or emailed to the Courier News, and 3, given to the Clerk Administrator. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and the decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Pledge of allegiance. Roll call first. Which you want to start? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now roll call. Here.
Dennis Gold.
Here.
James Caboodle.
Here.
Andrea Dare.
Here.
Marty Aiken.
Here.
Jason Krasik.
Here.
Al Caressi.
Here.
Larry Quinlan.
Here.
Christopher Raddick.
Here.
And others.
Here.
Marty Nevada will not be present this evening.
Okay, so we have a bunch of resolutions to approve, and one has already been taken off the docket, which is the Somerville Urban Renewal phase, which is the third one down. The first one is Somerville Multifamily, Block 62, lots 2 to 5, 23 to 37 Southbridge Street, a 5-story, 60-unit apartment building, parking deck, and retail, which we denied. So I would need a motion for
So
this
moved.
denial.
Second.
Who seconded it?
Al. Or,
Peter Rosinski.
Yes.
Andrea Dare.
Yes.
Jason Krasik.
Yes.
Al Caressi.
yes.
Larry Cleveland.
Is that everything?
That's it.
Wow, okay. Second one is, I don't think you got the mayor.
Kara gave me the list.
It's only the list of people that
Oh, it's
voted
only
it
people
down.
voted in favor.
Yeah.
Right. But no, only people that voted to deny can vote
That's
on
correct.
this.
Right.
Correct. I'm sorry.
Okay. Number 2, Arc Development Group LLC, Block 104, Lot 7, 25 East Brown Street. It was a subdivision. There is one connection. The original resolution said it was denied. It was not denied. It was approved. So we are voting on the resolution stating it was approved. So
Second.
Peter Rosinski.
yes.
Dennis Gold.
Yes.
Jane Caboodle.
Yes.
Andrea Dare.
Yes.
Marty Aiken.
Yes.
Al Caressi.
Yes.
Larry Cleveland.
Yes.
Christopher Raddick.
Yes.
And others.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question. Why was the urban renewal removed?
I don't know.
Because we did not get the information to do the resolution until Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock.
Okay, so it's just, it's a
Too
technical
late.
issue, not a,
Too late.
No,
not a
it'll be on in
substance issue.
December.
Okay.
Too late. Okay, we have a land use for 50 Kirby Urban Renewal. Is anybody here for that?
Oh, okay.
And this is asking for a 1-year extension, correct?
We're actually represented by in-house counsel. I'm general counsel for the applicant, so I can speak. She's not here at
Okay,
this time.
can you state your name?
Francine Teichfeld, spelled T-A-J-F-E-L.
And you're just requesting a 1-year
A
extension?
1-year extension on the existing approval, correct?
I have no problem with that. Anybody have a problem?
It's out of their hands, they're dealing with the alphabet agencies, and we don't know how that works.
For sure.
Yep. And do you feel you're making progress?
Good progress, yeah.
Great. Okay, somebody wants to move it?
I'll move that.
I'll second. That's my name. I am eligible because I'm outside the 200-foot mark. I'm close, but I'm outside of it, I've measured it.
Peter Rosinski.
Yes.
Dennis Gold.
Yes.
Jane Caboodle.
Yes.
Andrea Dare.
Yes.
Marty Aiken.
Yes.
Jason Krasik.
Yes.
Al Caressi.
Yes.
Larry Cleveland.
Yes.
Christopher Raddick.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so far so good. Okay, we are on number 5, discussion of ordinances, and there are several. To paraphrase, they are the garden apartment zones in Somerville, many of which flooded, and it's not for the first time. And to address these flooded properties and try to change the zoning to adjust to the flooding, new proposals have been made for ordinances. So what I've asked Mr. Cole to do is to give us what the old bulk standards and requirements for the garden apartments were, because I felt it should be sort of apples to apples comparison so we can envision what we're approving. And I think we just have to take it one area at a time because they're all very different in their surroundings in a lot of ways. So if you're okay with doing it that way.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to do a very brief introduction, and I've got our consultant, Mr. Driver, to fill in the blanks.
That would be great.
The garden apartment zones, to the best of our knowledge, and Rich would maybe vaguely remembers, probably not, were probably developed in the late 30s, early 40s when the need for housing changed after the war. So the garden apartments were all treated as a unit together. Over time and over weather and over other conditions, it's obvious now that each of the zones has its unique sets of challenges. We do want to rebuild those zones. We want people to have a place to live, but more importantly, a safe place to live. So the redevelopment committee met, we looked at some amendments to the current land use. We ran it by council. Council has introduced these 4 ordinances, each referring to a specific new G zone, which we get into, one by one. The intent is for this body to look at those proposed ordinances and bring any recommendations or alterations back to council. We have a public hearing scheduled for this coming Monday night, so this meeting is timely to fit into the schedule, so we can have the advertised hearing and then a vote on these ordinances as soon as Monday night. And I'd like this, Mr. Driver, to fill in the 90% of what I missed.
Let's go back.
Mr. Driver, you're present for the forming of these?
I was. Just to give you a bit of background, the mayor charged the redevelopment committee, who in turn charged Chairman Lovato and myself to work with the owner of the properties and come up with zoning that would allow for the units or the development to be rebuilt and rebuilt safely. And you'll notice that in a couple of those zones, it refers to rescue and recovery in a manner that says that they have to have egress and exit that is high and dry at all times. For instance, on South Brookside, where it went underwater, if they rebuild there, they have to have some form of bridge or construct that all the residents could get out without being confined to the apartments. The same on the, I think it's the R7 zone. The landlord owns a property on Grove Street, which abuts the Cliff Street apartments. Mm-hmm. And the zoning is written that there must be a construction, whether it be a road or a bridge or some form of access that is above the high flood line, so that emergency services can get in, but more importantly, residents can get out without being trapped. It also calls for, and this is a bit of an advertisement, just to back up. We were the first community in the state to insist on an emergency management plan on all new multifamily homes. In this zoning, we call not just for emergency management plans, but emergency recovery plans. They have to show us how they can get the tenants in and out safely as quickly as possible. So that's being built into the zoning. Other than that, all it does is we broke the garden apartment zoning into 4, right? Because the stuff to the west of Mountain with the high-rise apartments and things has a different set of circumstance than does the south side of Brookside Avenue versus the north side of Brookside Avenue versus Brown and versus Cliff. So we tried to write ordinances that suited the areas that they were addressing, and each one is somewhat separate and different. It also should be noted that the garden apartment ordinances that currently exist were written after the apartments were built. So that what is on the ground doesn't necessarily represent what the ordinance says, right? That was anticipating that if they're ever rebuilt, and it didn't take into account, for instance, again, the south side of Brookside Avenue or Cliff Street, they can't be rebuilt unless the ground floor is above the mean flood stage according to the DEP, which means they have to be on an elevated podium to start with, right? The DEP would not approve building in a floodplain any other way. It has to be high, dry, and safe for all the residents at all times. So that, we preempted the DEP because in there, we've already written that they have to be podium built and out of the flood level. The apartments on South Bridge Street were part of this original zoning, are now in the landfill redevelopment area. So we have not written zoning for that because that will be addressed in the redevelopment plan for the landfill. I think that's about it unless you've got any questions. I've tried to keep it brief because they're very straightforward. Should you pass this back to council and it gets adopted next Monday, all it does is set the ground rules for any rebuilding that could take place. It wouldn't change what happened. The landlord would have to come in front of the planning board and make a site plan application. It would have to conform with the zoning and any other requirements that the borough has. Because we're asking for emergency management plans and emergency recovery plans, while not in redevelopment areas, we would enter into a developer's agreement that covers all the legalities and requirements that they would need. So it would be managed. Of course, the building could be built to current standards, which would be somewhat different to what they are now. Fully sprinkled, up-to-date electric, HVAC, etc., etc., etc. But that would be the value of this board anyhow, to review those plans and either approve or send them away again. So if you've got questions, I'll try and answer them. Other than that,
I actually have 4 questions.
oh my God.
All right.
But they're probably not in the, I'm not gonna ask all 4 because we haven't hit some of the areas. So that's what we, to ask all 4 of my questions, and then when they get around to it, we can get a whole answer. That way I can just knock out all 4. Okay?
We'll go for it, and then we'll, we have to recheck it.
Okay. So my first question is, which I couldn't understand, the difference between garden apartment zone and an R zone.
Well, the garden apartment zone, to be brutally frank, is a prime example of poor land use planning. It was good in the 30s and 40s, but it's not appropriate now. So it was felt that, they're all residences anyhow, call it a residential zone. So the residential standards would apply. There's no ambiguity. Again, coming back to heating, cooling, fire suppression, all that stuff, as are in the various ordinances would apply.
Okay, so I'll skip over question number 2 because I did read it, but I'll get back to it. Is this considered spot zoning, or would spot zoning be included in this?
No, this isn't spot zoning. This is amending existing zoning, and it would be spot zoning if we were taking one block and one lot, but we're doing the whole lot of them, so no, it's not spot zoning. And we run it by the attorneys to make sure.
Oh, okay.
But you did work with the developer who owns the properties.
Only in as much as saying, what do you want to do, when do you want to do it, and we wrote this, he didn't.
Okay, so I'll hit my other questions, because after reading and going through the whole thing, Brookside has a lot of affordable housing in it. So,
That's a matter of conjecture.
but what is the percentage of affordable housing in Brookside? I mean, we
I
probably
don't
know.
it is not state certified affordable housing.
It's
That's
not
the
deed
first
restricted.
We have no affordable housing under the Council of Affordable Housing Act in New Jersey, in this borough. Now, one of the things that we did, get a concession from Edgewood Properties, for, I think it's R6, which is Orchard and Brown, would become what, for want of a better word, workforce housing. It wouldn't be, the borough does not have an affordable housing commitment or program. And until the council decides to enter into that, which would be a rather drawn out and costly venture for the borough, we felt that workforce housing would be the best way to go.
So define workforce housing.
Workforce housing is lower rents.
Does that include Section 8?
Section 8 is a totally different thing. And
Well, we
Section
can
8
use
is,
Section 8
correct,
vouchers.
Section 8 is a federal government program
Right,
managed by the, by HUD.
right.
It is oversubscribed to because landlords have to agree to participate in the program, and then the town has got an allocation, from my understanding of the Section 8 program, and people are given vouchers.
Right.
And they can move around, they can move out of town, they
Not
can go.
all of them, not all of the vouchers allow you to move out.
Well, I defer to you, Andrew, because I don't know, it's only what
No,
I've
but
been
I was
told.
just, but there are people that are on Section 8 vouchers living in these apartments.
Well,
And if they go to a different,
Complex.
thank you, is Brookside gonna honor them, or are they
if
gonna
you,
be left
if you,
without?
if you look at the way the zoning is written, it refers to either workforce or affordable, I'm not quite sure
It
why.
refers to affordable housing component.
Yeah.
And it refers that it can be in any of them. What we have done is specifically say that those apartments at Brown and Orchard will be. But that he could put whatever he wants in any one of those buildings.
Well,
We don't control it.
yes, well, we control it if we, well, this is gonna get into those zones
This-
specifically, but,
With all due
What you're
respect,
doing is
Deidre, we
you're-
can't get into affordable housing here because
no,
it's
we're not
written
getting
in
to affordable
council.
housing, but we can decide whether there should be affordable housing in each project as opposed to putting all the affordable housing in one area.
I would challenge that based on what little experience I have with it in other communities. If you follow the rules set by COA, it sets a percentage of housing, it doesn't say where. And there is a huge, relatively new apartment development on Route 202 in Raritan, built by a guy called NFL Hill. There's hundreds of apartments in there. Pardon me. The affordable housing component is in one building.
But it's still within the site of that whole development as
Well,
opposed
this
to
would be
off-site.
too.
Well, this is.
This would be too. If we're calling them workforce housing, he can put them anywhere he wants. We can't stipulate. What we have stipulated that the ones at Brown and I forget.
But that's where he's gonna put them then. I mean, if we stipulate where it can go, that's where it's gonna end up.
Yeah, well, I don't think, well, you can have the debate, you can make the recommendation. I mean, I don't necessarily have to agree with what
No,
the
you don't have to.
recommendation.
I'm just pointing out that you're creating an area where you are segregating the housing by income. Let me just leave it at that for now.
Yeah, I mean, that's very idealistic, but it's true.
Well, no, but it's not only idealistic, but it's also in fact, because if we make a decision that everything on Brown is gonna be affordable, then everybody knows. It's not even a stretch to go, oh, all the poor people live there. That's gonna be the first thing. Now, there are certain buildings and certain places where they agreed to do affordable housing where it's mixed use, it's in the building. Is it apartment 5, is it apartment 25? We don't know. And that is what's supposed to promote equality and diversity.
You know, the sensitivity of this subject, I'd love to have a discussion, but I don't think now is the time to do it because there's far too many financial and tax implications to affordable housing, and I'll come back to the fact that unless the council changes policy, we don't have an affordable housing requirement, we can't impose one.
Oh, we're opposed, there's one
But
listed
it's
here.
mentioned
It's listed
in-
here, an
in the
affordable
ordinance.
housing component, so we can stipulate what that is over at.
Only once it's adopted, and it contradicts the borough policy, so I'm getting out of my depth real quick. And we'd need to have Cara or Frank Regan or one of the other attorneys weigh in on that. But we felt, as a team, that while it wouldn't conform to the rules set by affordable housing, first thing, having a more affordable component, and whether we call it affordable or workforce or whatever, doesn't really matter. The intent is to get units back into the market at the lowest possible affordable rent. But it will never be Section 8.
Yeah, but it won't be deed restricted, I mean, it won't be deed restricted either.
No, it won't.
So there's nothing to say that it will be affordable over time, unless it becomes
Again,
part of an affordable
that's a
housing.
policy
So-
issue by the town.
So with this just question, maybe this is gonna go more towards Dennis and Jane here. With the intent of these ordinances, is it to have, because as you said, we don't have affordable housing stipulations, mandates, color, anything in town. Is the idea to say that if we're using round numbers, 500 new apartments, we're gonna tear down, rebuild 500 apartments, that using like the COA standard, that if you're gonna put a 500 apartment, you have to put 50 low income, deed restricted in that.
Well, that will be,
Is that the intent behind this, is saying that?
that
he's supposed-
specificity will be in the redevelopers agreement, because there's no number listed.
There
And that's why-
there is no number, because if you want to get down and dirty just quickly, COA doesn't exist anymore.
I understand that, but
Therefore, the rules are very loose and fluid, and they're managed by the Superior Court in each county. The special master in this county is a guy named Tom Miller, and he is the affordable housing guru. He retires at the end of the year, and there's no word on who will replace him. But you're absolutely right. The prime objective of this was to give him a roadmap to rebuild as quickly as possible, because people were displaced, people are waiting for something to happen. Now, if we have this debate and it goes on, what we're really doing is just slowing things down. Now, I would never ever say don't have the debate on affordable housing, but it's got to be borough-wide.
Yeah, and
right, but we
And
as a
that's kind of-
planning board can make recommendations to the council that they solve that issue before they pass an ordinance that does not have a definition of what they are calling an affordable housing component.
And that's kind of what my.
No, and you're playing semantics, but you're absolutely correct. And maybe for Monday, the wording gets changed, but the recommendation from this board comes up to the council that you should explore.
Yeah, so
No,
perhaps.
A range of rents.
Yes.
Perhaps, and I guess that's where my question lies, is that since we don't have an affordable housing thing to just say, you have to,
10% of the units have to be whatever, yeah.
maybe as a board, we say, hey, yeah, let's use 10%, I don't know what the standard number is.
I don't-
It-
The
it
recommendation
fluctuates.
to the council should be to add in, instead of just saying an affordable housing element, a percentage that,
A little more defined.
something. I understand that we don't have one to the point, and I.
Well, that was why we were reluctant to really get into the meat of the thing.
Correct.
Because we would then be making policy, and it's not our role.
and
It's not our role, but at the
We
same
make a
time, it's our
recommendation.
recommendation as a planning
No,
board.
no,
to-
I'm saying it wasn't Bernie's,
Yeah,
my
oh,
role.
okay, yeah, I mean, I think it's our, we
You
need
can make
to,
the recommendation, yes.
one of the things we're gonna be doing tonight is visioning what this is going to look like and be like in a large portion of Somerville. I mean, these are taking big chunks of land with a lot of housing on it. And, so if there's an affordable component to it, I think it has to be a considered affordable component, not sort of we'll work it out as we go, because developers are gonna try not to, I mean, we have an ideal, I think in Somerville, where it's a mixed, our housing is mixed. I mean, you have,
I know, see,
And I think that's what we're
I
trying
would
to keep is
disagree
that
with you
idea.
to start with. And if you've read the recent press, this landlord, in a number of his developments recently, has done, what do they call it?
Veterans housing.
Veterans
oh,
housing.
I'm
No,
not,
no, no, no.
I-
This
I'm not-
guy understands the need.
I understand
We
that.
were looking for the best method to give him a roadmap to rebuild. We put in there a need for developers agreements. You know, he's still going to go through the normal planning board approval process, so that if you've got a recommendation, because I don't want to get bogged down on affordable housing, you've got other things. If you have a need to make a recommendation according to affordable housing, make a recommendation that it be a percentage of the total or whatever, and maybe you encourage the council to look more fully at the affordable housing within the borough as a policy change.
yeah, and that's, I'm sorry.
No, I don't.
And again, because that is we don't have a policy on it, so we can't say we very, you have.
Well, we do have a policy, we will not participate in
Correct,
COA.
sorry.
Is the
We
policy.
don't have a policy
But then-
mandating affordable housing in any new developments, so we can't relate back to that and say, follow those guidelines. Mike, quick, maybe.
Well, the master plan land use zone that says we're already affordable.
Correct.
You need
And
free market conditions.
the free
meaning
market
that we
conditions.
don't have the deed restrictions.
so we have no deed restrictions. This doesn't deed restrict anything. What is, just, to get a number, in another town that uses, let's say, the old COA, what is the percentage that?
It changed year to year. It started out at 20 and it dropped to 10. And I think in its last iteration, Mike, it remained at 10%,
I
right?
think it's still 1 in 5, but
Somewhere in that area.
It goes
So
deep.
from us, my question is if we're gonna look at this, because I don't wanna spend all day debating the concept of affordable housing, what level or anything else. We're only making a recommendation to the council based on their existing, the ordinances that they introduced. Maybe we throw a percentage in that consider this when making. But,
yeah, I mean,
Tying with what you're saying, it has to be for each area. It can't be, you have 4 ordinances.
I think there's
and they all
wording in there
comply.
that says
No, it says
No,
can
it
be
says it
offsite.
can be offsite.
They can
be
shut
in
it all over.
any of those
But the-
zones.
but the
I
problem
think it
is
says.
each of
I don't
these-
have it in front of me to read.
The way it's worded is, affordable units may be constructed either on or off-site as part of an overall project, or in another project existing under construction in any of those zones. So what we're trying to avoid, I think someone was, is having a area that is just affordable housing.
We'll make that recommendation.
Well, that's what, I think
Well,
that
that's
the
what
other
I'm
part of it
trying to
needs to
say.
say that each plot of land or each zone has to have its own affordable housing
I think
elements on site.
Your idea of taking each ordinance separately
Yes.
is good, so if you start with the 101, 101, make that recommendation.
Yeah.
and then
All,
go
no,
on.
But
they
they
all
all
have
need to
to
have-
have,
But we'll take them one at a
because
time.
each of these zones can be sold up. So then you can have a garden apartment zone that's sold up and has no affordable
So I
housing.
think,
But yet we are looking at agreeing
You
to
want the requirement to
90%
so
coverage.
yeah, the requirement goes with each zone, as
So it
opposed to
can't
you
be
can
offsite.
put it all somewhere in one place.
but.
Well, the off-site could be changed too, because it's really meant to be by the same
I
owner.
mean, yes,
So quick
But the
question.
off-site puts us right back at the Mount Laurel.
that's right, that's why we're getting rid of that.
That's the whole reason for COA to begin with, is because we
Yeah,
can't.
let's not
Mount
go
Laurel.
there right
All
now,
right, so
Larry.
we're not gonna, yeah, so we're
No, I'm
gonna,
just saying
I
that, that's
think,
why I think it should be, every zone has to have its own requirement and not transferable to another zone.
Okay, Andrew, do you have other questions?
Wait a minute, Chris said it.
Yeah, so we're keeping affordable housing wording in here, makes sense, got it in the conversation, that makes sense. But what's the definition of affordable housing if we don't have a policy to refer to?
That is,
Like,
we have to borrow a definition from somewhere.
And that-
Or the
that's
council
covered.
has to borrow the definition.
okay, well, that would be our recommendation, that they define, because I'd be very worried just in general.
Yeah,
because-
well,
Yeah, again, we don't have the
and
definition.
we would have to go back to either the courts or the most recent published data, and I can work with Mike on that. But the affordable housing calculation was based on a percentage of the median income per county. And it was 60% or 40% or 30% of the median income, which meant that affordable housing in Somerset County was far more expensive than
Yeah, a lot of
affordable
people
housing in Salem
Yeah.
County.
Okay,
Because the
so-
median income was a lot higher.
We would define that somewhere.
It would have to be defined, but it'd be defined by policy by county.
Like
Yeah, not in an
So
ordinance.
we would, yeah.
Not in an
no,
ordinance,
no.
it'd be
All right,
defined
no,
by
so
policy.
I think that's what we need to
Yeah, so
include
we
here.
need to say that it has to be defined, we need a
Yeah.
definition.
Well, you need to write a letter, I think, and unfortunately you don't have Kara here to write the
I
letter.
know, the one time we need a
Yeah,
lawyer.
but I mean, you need to write a letter, and if you wish, I will work with you to get one ready, because you've got to get it prepared.
Before Monday.
It's got to be done like tomorrow,
Yeah.
What's the rush?
Yeah,
because,
but that,
What's the rush?
the rush?
well, the rush is,
Doesn't happen Monday, what happens?
if we want to get the right signal, you've got people who have been displaced, and the borough has been accused of not responding to their needs as quickly as it should. Point two. If we wait, we've got to redo this next year, because we've got one council meeting.
We have two in December,
We got two in
so we
December.
only have one meeting.
So it could be done in December, but if we want to see some action early in the new year, it's better to have the zoning in place now.
I'm more than happy to put something together tomorrow to send over to Colin and the lawyers and everything with our recommendations. Because again, I just want to point out, I agree with you, Larry, like, where's Rush? We're only making a recommendation. The council's gonna vote on this on Monday.
With
Or
or
they're not.
without your
Yeah,
comments.
with or without our comments.
No, no.
So I don't want to delay our comments
No.
to wait for a lawyer before we send them to the council, because if we send no comments to the council,
Well, just as you know,
There's
it's
not.
scheduled for the
Yes.
public hearing.
correct.
And
What
it's
the motion,
advertised.
what the motion will be after the public hearing could be
Good for-
motion to adopt, motion to
Yes.
deny, motion to
I
table.
just want to make sure we
But-
give a recommendation
I
before
agree
you guys
with
get to
that.
that, so that.
We want to.
Okay, I have one more clarifying question. All of these zones flooded,
No. South Brookside flooded,
all right, so
and
which,
Cliff Street
wait,
flooded.
so give me the numbers.
R4 and R7 flooded, R5 and R6 did not.
All right, so the rush to accommodate people who might have gotten flooded out are it's really in the R4 and the R7.
No, I think you've been very subjective with that, because,
How am I being subjective?
well, let me
Okay.
finish. That really help. If they're going to do a reconstruction properly, they've got to take down more than one building at a time. And they're looking at maybe Cliff Street early on, but more like Mercer and Brookside to be done, both sides first. Because there was some severe damage, even though they didn't get flooded, the north side of Brookside around Mercer did suffer damage. And I believe that's what you saw too, Mick.
I believe so, there's 121, I think,
Which is the R5 zone.
yeah.
Well, it's R4, R5.
Or for the south side of our family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's take these one at a time, I think, because they
Can
are
I go back
all
and
such a
sit in
different.
the audience now?
You can stay in, I'm just, my big question is where did these unit numbers come from, is my first
What do
question.
you mean?
So, like,
That's
the
55
maximum
units per
density of
acre.
55 units per acre, what are they compared to what is there now?
No,
And where did the
and
numbers come
you, that was a consensus, discussed around the table, led by, in fact, the chairman of the planning board. And if you want, I'll call him right now.
No, I told him not to get the phone.
Well, he told me I could call him.
It's based in some, to some extent by the height requirement.
And
Square footage.
the area of land,
And the
too.
square footage of each unit. We wanna have
Yeah.
600
Right, but
per studio.
what I'm trying to see is what we have now, unit
I
wise.
don't know. I can't tell you.
Does anybody know
Oh, I know,
what unit
okay.
numbers we have in these zones?
The current G zone allows 16 units per acre.
So we're going from 16 units to
Well, no,
55.
that's what this says. I have the data from Dave Myers for the R5
Mhm.
and the R4 only in Brookside, not the R4 in Oak Terrace, just the R4 in
Okay,
South
on,
One, right?
on the other side of Mount Nashville, I
Right.
think.
No,
Okay,
that's a Brookside Drive, you have
Yeah.
the north and south side.
right.
On the north side, there's 13 units per acre. On the south side is 24. That's the only data I have on the zones right now. Borough has this data. We have this.
Well, we have it, I don't have it.
13
right
buildings or 13, so 13,
No, units per acre.
when you say
There's
unit, you mean an
228
apartment or
there's-
do you mean one of the garden
No,
apartment
no,
buildings?
it's
There's
all-
228
apartment.
units. 228 units in R5,
Okay,
okay? Out of the 228, and there is a little over 17 acres. You did back the math out, so 13 units per acre. On the R4, just between Mercer and Mountain,
mhm,
okay, it's a little over 5 acres and has 130 units. You do the math, it's 24 units.
okay.
And just to, and I'm not being specific because I wasn't prepared to go into this depth of stuff. This board has approved 40 and 50 units per acre in redevelopment, and they've approved much more than 12 or 13 units per acre in a significant number as well.
But not necessarily in residential areas. I mean, we had zones where we knew we would have higher density. These were not zones where we had planned on higher
Well,
density.
you also need to consider that where the maximum density is suggested, it probably wouldn't be seen from the surrounding areas. You know, we did put
I
a
think
little,
the
we
people-
did put a little bit of thought into this, Deidre. We didn't just pull it out of the sky.
I'm not here to argue with you, I'm just asking clarifying questions of how these numbers, the 55 units per acre from 13 and 24, that's like a huge.
Well, you've got to remember, one of the first statements I made, that the current zoning was written well and truly after these were built to start with, when we were dealing with a suburban mentality. And it's pretty consistent with all the zoning that existed at that particular time in town, and they've been changed over the years.
Right, but my question to the board, and I'm gonna shut up and let other people talk, is what do we want this area to look like when it's redeveloped? Do we want it to be dense townhouse, row house, or do you want it to be more of the suburban feel of the houses around the area? I mean, I'm not saying build houses there, but this is going to a complete opposite end, which is very dense housing, and it's row housing, basically. And so I think that is something you need to envision as we talk about these density numbers and height numbers. You know, this is saying 5 stories. It's a tall building in those areas. So let's just take a look at, let's start with R4, I guess, is the biggest one, which is,
That's where
actually
Oak-
says on it R4 somewhere, let me find
Yeah,
it.
it's Oak Terrace.
Yeah,
Oak Terrace is Brookside South.
I'm just looking for my paperwork, because they're all about it.
Six. So, you know, as we all flip through, I guess one of my questions, and again, this is
Ordinance 53,
53.
2653.
Yeah,
Oh, you said Oak Terrace
yeah,
and Brookside.
2653.
Brookside South.
No, I guess,
Brookside Drive, yes.
because my first concern when reading these was obviously the same thing as Jared was pointing out, is the units per acre. I do want to point out and just question this and maybe, I assume the concept in this is to be putting parking underneath and raising the building. So that we're not having ground floor
South
apartments?
of Brookside, that's the only way it could be right.
So.
But north of Brookside,
Which is
not necessary.
R5,
Yeah.
it doesn't go underwater, you know.
Because I guess my question when I was mapping it out and trying to lay it out was that if, right now you have apartments and you have, you know, parking all around it, and now you're bringing the parking under it and going up, what is that other, you know, obviously that's where you get the additional units, is the extra expense of the underground parking, or not underground,
At
but
grade.
Yeah.
graded parking, and now you're raising everything above. I assume that's the conceptual, is that we're.
We haven't seen any conceptuals, it's
well,
what's running around in our little apple brain.
In my head, I guess, is that we're raising these buildings so the apartments don't flood.
All right.
And hopefully we move our cars out before
Well,
rain
that's the
comes.
emergency response plan part of it.
Yep.
too.
But so, when you have an acre, and before you had to have an acre, and you had an apartment, and then parking lot next to it, now you're putting that parking lot under, so you'd have more building, because you have the parking lot, everything raised above it. So you increase density.
Well, right, it's
Yeah,
all,
Based
you're
on that,
increasing, if you look at the impervious coverage allowed, it's
above
90%.
And
Building coverage is 75% of that lot. So right now, we have a lot of grass and trees in the garden apartment setup. What's gonna happen is 75% of that's gonna be building, 90% of that will be impervious, which means 10% of the whole site will be green.
We don't have that anywhere.
And that is
Okay.
density like we have on veterans, basically. It's, I think, the closest thing I can come to. What is the density on Veterans Memorial in those buildings?
I think Storms is around 55.
So wait, so the Storms building,
Station.
Station House, across from the deck,
Yes.
that's 55.
It's 135 units, right, 135?
yeah.
I think it's 135, I think it's 1.5 acres. Just back the math up.
I think he was asking impervious coverage.
Yeah.
Well, that's 100%.
Well, no, there's 10% that's little plantings
Yes,
and
there's
things.
not much.
But that's what we're,
Yeah,
that's what we're
okay.
looking at putting on, in these zones, and that's, I'm just saying.
Well, you got to be, what does R5 say? You're looking at R4.
I'm looking at R4,
R4 is in a floodplain.
right, but it's still saying you
Look
can
at
cover
R5,
90% of the impervious, you have 90% is impervious coverage.
Well, you either do that or you don't build at all, and it just becomes a lake. I mean, that's the alternative.
There has to be some sort of
Yeah.
middle ground or something. because
our
that-
I really don't know what it is
I'll tell you what
on a
R5 is. Let me
cost-benefit
just find my
analysis,
R5.
Larry.
Well, no, I understand what they're looking at, they.
R5 is the same, 75% building coverage, 90% impervious coverage, 55 units per acre.
All four of these are the same, exactly the same.
And then I'm not quite sure,
The units change in a few.
you can have a 5-story unit or a 3-story unit. If it's a townhouse, it's 3-story. If it's apartments, it's 5 stories.
Except the R6 is just a grade.
Yeah, R6 is its own little site. That's why
Yeah.
I'm doing R4 and 5
Okay.
first, because I think those
Well,
are
on
the-
6, I think this takes into account what's there. If memory serves me correct, because that would be a
Yeah,
rehab.
R6 is not as big a deal. R7 is something that needs to be talked about. But I think R4 and 5 are gonna sort of set how we feel about how you want that developed, or how you wanna recommend gets developed. What's on here is incredibly dense developed site. And I think there's a compromise somewhere between the old garden apartments and Veterans Memorial.
Well, then you put that into your
Well, and
recommendation.
But that's my opinion, and there are other people sitting at this table.
I'm just taking notes here, so in case we're, putting a letter together,
No, it's usually your recommendation.
for a recommendation.
What we normally do is, whatever the recommendation, the planning, you guys would vote on it, then I would draft it, we'll have a column, I send it to Kevin, say the planning board's recommendation
Yeah.
on X, Y, and Z's ordinance is X, Y, and Z.
So, again, we looked at the affordable housing concept, to put in there as a note. Is the question we're talking about the impervious coverage or the units per acre?
Well, the density, I think
Okay.
that is the density. The height, the height to coverage is what density is. And what they're, you have your setbacks, which also is light and air, but right now, when you look at what they're saying can go on this site, it is 75% of it can be covered with building. 90% of it will be covered with impervious, which means paving and building combined. And then, the 55 units per acre says how, and the height, so it tells you how big those buildings are gonna be. So what we have now is garden apartments, which do flood. I'm not contradicting that at all, and there needs to be a solution. But I think this solution is a density that I don't necessarily think we're for in these
Well,
areas.
then maybe with your notes, you come up with a density number you like.
And
and
I guess
Well,
that's
that's
my
what I'm
question.
saying.
Are we looking at specific numbers or saying our recommendation is for them to revisit the density? Or are we trying to come up
Make a
with
recommendation.
a density?
What was the density?
To make a recommendation.
Be specific,
Yes,
so we
but
have
let
time.
me just, what was the density recommendation that we had for the Rubin estate? That's right across the street basically from this. Do you remember what the units
They were
were?
doing those, remember they were talking about those duplexes?
That was the,
18, I think, per
And that,
acre.
Right.
yeah.
So that was what we had all, and we fought because people came in with higher density and we said, no way, we sent them packing. 18 an acre was the density from where the Rubin estate was, which is the other side of the brook from this, and is the buffer zone to the residential neighborhood somewhat, which is one of the reasons we held that number. But
I know we
What was
granted
Kirby?
relief on Lidco, because that was gonna be 24.
Kirby Avenue,
Yeah,
No, Lidco, the one that's currently.
no, they asked about Kirby also.
17, 20,
Okay.
17.
yeah, so Kirby Avenue, that, yeah,
And
so
that's with a
that's something
five-story
you can look
building.
at now.
No, they're townhouses in Kirby Avenue.
But they're
You're
house,
thinking of 40 Haynes, which is a four-story building.
Right.
Is it four-story? Yeah, it's four-story.
yeah.
So if you do the math, and if you look at the Kirby Avenue, I think the plan says 16, 17 units per acre.
Right, and this is 55, and it just seems like an astronomically high number for a residential area lot for me. And I would love to get this passed quickly so we can rebuild houses for people who were kicked out, but I don't want us jumping so fast that we end up with overbuilt sites that we can't walk away from.
well, then make a recommendation.
But also, just to be, use a little common sense, people who've been displaced
They're not gonna be moving back into
in the next 3 years, because if we approve this as it is, it'd still take 3 years to fix it. These people are going to be someplace else. This is a replacement for.
Well, you're actually gonna kick out other people while they're building.
That too, that's the point also, but this is not a reaction, like, if we don't do this today, so that they can get their letter Monday, so they can approve it, like they're gonna be digging up on January 2nd. That's not gonna happen. That's just practically not gonna happen, because, when you think about it, that's nice, we still need to see the plans. We still need to see the building.
Correct, all that
We still need to see
stuff.
the architecture, all that stuff, so 1 month of thinking about it the right way now is gonna save the whole town.
Well, hang
A lot of heartache and
hang
No,
on.
Larry, I agree with
Larry.
you, but it's not our decision.
Yeah.
That's my concern. I wanna make sure
I'm
we
just saying
send the
that
Larry.
recommendation.
it's-
I have to take an objection.
All right, Larry,
I'm
slow
sorry.
down, slow down, slow down.
I take objection to the fact that you put some good thinking to it. A lot of good thinking went into it. You don't have to agree to it, but don't disparage the people
I
that wrote it.
apologize for that, that was not what I meant.
Well, that's how it came up.
And I'm gonna apologize for that, because I was wrong for me to say that. I'm just talking about, we're being asked to do something with
You're
not
being asked
all
to
of-
make a recommendation.
Yeah, yeah,
You're
we're
not
just
being asked to
being
do
asked to
anything else.
consider it.
Well, the gut reaction for me would be no, not at 90%.
Yeah, but we're not
at
approving or
75%.
disapproving, we're making
We're
a
not voting on it.
recommendation.
Recommendation that
So
they
your
say, no, this is
recommendation,
gonna be.
right, so we can
No.
just say we hate it and send it back, but that's
No,
not
that's not
productive.
responsible. I
So
understand.
what we're trying to do is
Well, to keep it to
be a little
bold,
productive.
Madam Chair, if
Go
I
ahead.
can, if the concern is the density side,
The mass.
it's the mass.
And the
Instead of
density
going
coverage,
into the weeds and coming up with a number, which no one's gonna agree to
No.
tonight, why don't we say that this is the way we're going, that you want density consistent with Kirby Avenue redevelopment, or something, so
Recent redevelopment.
tie something in to say,
a project that's already done.
something that, in this
For something
concept,
that's already approved.
as
Well,
opposed to
like Kirby Avenue.
55, saying 30, I'm just saying, we think this development should be similar to
The Kirby Avenue.
Kirby Avenue. Be something that you think is appropriate.
That's
And then we have all those numbers.
That's better than me guessing on numbers.
All
That's
right,
fantastic.
so you say, look, this is no different than Kirby Avenue. It
Right.
should be treated the same. Boom,
Yeah.
and we're house. Gaston
I would
Avenue,
say
we haven't had anything built
Haynes
yet.
No, nothing against it.
Right, so we don't have
Haynes
any
is
gas.
probably the closest to an existing residential neighborhood on,
Well, 40 Haynes and 50 Kirby are roughly
They're
the
about
same
the same,
density.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Haynes is a little bit more.
But
Not
not much.
much.
I mean, you're
Not much.
talking
Good
between
point.
16 and 22
Well,
units
what
per
I
acre.
find comfortable about doing it this way is we had residents in for Kirby Avenue. We had a huge buy-in,
A lot of visioning.
a lot of envisioning, and so this was something that the town people, and people who lived in the houses, ended up being comfortable with. So, that's,
Well, put that in as a recommendation.
That's
I
it.
mean, you're
Well,
not-
that- yeah.
I mean, and I do wanna, thank Colin and everybody involved, Dennis. I don't know who sat in the meetings and came up with all the different things. I love the emergency access. I love the concept of it. I think that's a great thing that we add into it. And I do, I wanna see them get rebuilt, and I want them out of a floodplain. I don't wanna sit here in 8 years, or, it's a 100-year storm that happens every 8 years now, or whatever it is, and be having a conversation of why did we just repair these apartments and do the same damn thing we've been doing? And so I like this. I like where we're going. If we're gonna make a recommendation to the council to consider stuff, great, we make the recommendation, and at the end of the day, it's the council's decision on it, but I do just wanna point out that I am in favor of raising these buildings and getting, if we have to increase density a little bit, to get them raised up so it makes it doable for a developer. I'm more inclined to do that to get out of a floodplain than I am to give a developer in a different residential area
right,
to raise it just to make more money.
right, right. So,
I do, I wanna, compromise with them somewhere in here, but
absolutely.
I like your idea, Mike, of how we do it, rather than us trying to come up with a number of, hey, impervious coverage should only be 62%. I don't,
Well, we don't have to reinvent the wheel of people, if the board is comfortable with some of the redevelopment plan. If you're not. But if you are comfortable, I'm saying, you can just say similar, and we have those. It's already recommendation. This is what Kirby is, it's right in there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, if that's where the board wants to
I
go.
think a not to exceed might.
Yeah.
Like a not to exceed Kirby
Because
Avenue.
we're gonna need a number.
Well, if,
Kirby Avenue has numbers.
yeah, if the recommendation is written to refer back to.
To recent
Standards
development.
on Kirby Avenue.
The numbers are there.
We have all the numbers in Kirby Avenue. We have them, green space numbers,
All right.
maximum improvement coverage, density, we have all that.
Yeah, and again, I mean, as a recommendation, because I'm not opposed to, we're going to go a little above that because we're raising buildings, we're in a floodplain, and there might be some, I'm not opposed to going a little ahead of that, so the council can make that decision. But I think referencing the recent projects, be it Kirby or, any of them all seem to be about the same, correct? The recent ones we've approved?
Well, the ones that, well, depends where you're looking.
In town's a little higher.
The ones along Veterans and
Oh, yeah,
town are
yeah,
higher
yeah,
than
because
when
they're-
we're
that's
moving on to the
correct.
residential
Okay.
area. And so I think
They're
that's
not
what we're,
yours.
yeah.
We have really two transition zones. One is Gaston, but we don't have any development there yet. Gaston. Well, who knows what you're working on, all right? The other one is Kirby Avenue, which we have, the Haynes building is done, essentially.
Right.
And then we have one's approval, we just got an extension for time.
Right.
But you've seen all this.
So-
So it's something the board's seen, that both, the two biggest sections, the board's approved on Kirby Avenue.
And we're talking about this for all four of the ordinances?
Yeah, I just wanna, first I wanna survey everybody, because, Jason, I didn't even know I'm talking with Larry. So I just wanna do like a survey of everybody, just go around and get feedback.
In
from
terms of
where
the
you are.
density and the height,
Well-
you wanna have the same discussion, or you wanna tie the two together?
Well,
Well, I
first,
think
I
the
just
two
want to
are
get a
part
feeling
and
about
parcel of the same thing.
this concept of recommending already existing development standard back to the council. If you're comfortable doing it that way, rather than trying to parse out each nitty-gritty detail.
Yeah,
I think it would be simply just to go along with what Mike had recommended as a starting point. And then the council can either throw that back or take some of the information and use that. And then ultimately, we're gonna have a say eventually when the prints come back, the plans come back.
Well,
So-
but if we give them a high density, we
Yeah.
can't take it away.
No,
I mean, that's the problem.
You're right, but like, as I indicated, go with what Mike said as a starting point, and then it's on their shoulders, council's shoulders.
I mean, should the board want to go this, we would say, it's a transition zone similar to Kirby Avenue, and the planning board makes some recommendations that the standards be similar to Kirby Avenue, we can just list the standards. And say, look, this was used in 40 Haynes, the approval for 50 Kirby, we can all look at those plans.
Right.
They're in
And they
Tony's
were done
office.
with residents buy-in, which I think is the
Right.
other big point,
And
is
it-
there's a lot of neighborhoods being affected that are peripheral to here.
Right, and the other question or their comment is, you want to see affordable done at every location. That's it. And then with some more concepts being, defining what that means. The council should define what affordable means. So
Rather
we do
than
that
use
as
affordable,
concept.
might maybe say a mix,
Well, you guys can figure that out.
a mix of rental.
Chris, how do you feel about
Yeah,
it?
but
wait,
that's
wait.
council's job.
Yeah, right, that's what I'm saying.
I just want to go back and get a survey from everybody. So Chris,
Quick
I
question,
want to
like,
get,
Kirby
like,
Avenue is four-story?
Yeah,
yes. Four-story townhouses. Yeah.
they're apartments.
Apartments.
They're apartments, they're all gonna be apartments. 50 Kirby is built like townhouses, but they're
They're
apartments. The 40 Haynes are two big buildings, they're 4 stories, and the second building's almost finished in like 4 weeks. It's not. They're landscaping now, so you can drive by and see everything, it is what it is for 40
You
Haynes.
can feel the density.
Yeah.
So Christopher,
Think about that.
And then go and look at
Chris, how do
the
you feel about
station
this?
house and see what 50
Christopher Attic, can I get your input?
Hey, no problem. Yeah, no, I like that approach, I like referencing what we have, it's worked in the past, we know what it looks like. The biggest thing I had with trying to envision what the 55 units per acre looks like is really trying to picture what those buildings will look like and how many of them would be there. The Storms property is a good reference from my head, that is, like, I'm not sure if I can imagine those stamped out on a 17-acre lot. So I do like Mike's recommendation, affordable housing thing in there, and then the define affordable housing, those 3 things are probably mine.
Yeah, I just think what Jason says is, the meeting's Monday, we want to get the concepts. We don't have, this board has done the heavy work in Kirby Avenue, and it takes weeks or months to get the team together. So to get the recommendation in concept, and say, this is what the planning board recommends in concept, and let it go with that. My
Now,
opinion.
you want to chime in?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm quite comfortable with a 4-story height, but I'm comfortable with the 2022,
Kirby Avenue,
yeah, zoning,
using the same
yeah,
standards.
units per reference date.
Yeah,
Kirby Avenue, similar.
Mr. Mayor?
I was part of the think tank, I guess, or unthink tank that
So
designed
don't
this.
think anymore tonight.
I hear the concern about the density. I don't know if 16 to 20 is enough. The 55 may be too much. I'd rather put a specific number on it. And I'll have more chance to comment,
Yeah.
at the next go-around. I would prefer to see a number, so
Well,
council.
Well,
we have numbers, we have
We
numbers.
can give you numbers. We can give
Well,
you
the number
numbers.
in Kirby is 22, you said, right?
It's under that.
18,
I think that's what it is. There's a caveat how you built it, what the number
Yeah.
was.
I mean,
So-
I don't want, Tribeca or,
Well,
Midtown.
we don't want Veterans Memorial in these
Well,
neighborhoods
it's
either.
good.
Yeah.
That's gonna be the shock of it, for people who want anywhere near any of these, it's gonna be a major change.
Go and look at the streets like we did and then.
I have, I go on them every day.
Yeah, I drive around town and I understand.
Look at them
All right,
through
so
fresh
Larry,
eyes.
we've heard from you. Anthony? What are you thinking?
She's got 5 more questions.
Good.
No, I won't ask any more, but I think the 55 units per acre is ridiculous. I like what everybody else was saying, at least we have something that's already
You can
in
see it.
place and you know the numbers. So you start with those numbers and if you have to increase a little, that would be okay, but I just think, like Deidre and everybody else, you want to put these buildings in neighborhoods, and we're gonna look like concrete and buildings, and that's it, no grass, no personality, and we'll lose our community
And the
feel.
rentals.
And the rentals, because it seems like we want to drive people out of town as opposed to keeping people in town. So, that's my feeling.
All right,
I agree, simple rules.
Is the board comfortable with using words similar as opposed to this, the recommendation? Similar?
yes.
I prefer similar, because again, like I said, I'm, and with respect to everybody's comments, my opinion, I'm open to the idea to get out of a flood area. If we have to increase density more, I'm much more open to that in this conceptual than in a different area.
All right, I want to throw one more thing out there. I heard that. The R4 that's tucked up in the corner against the highway, I think that is a prime space to do higher, denser. I think that's a
Well,
different
well, it
zone
is.
somewhat. Yes, but this is all
Oh, you want to
R4. I'm
separate
thinking-
I cannot answer that, you'd have to address
I-
that.
Right,
Yeah,
but
what
I
you're
am saying, I remember when we were looking at the Rubin estate, we were gonna give high-rise density as a trade-off. Remember this?
Yes.
Because there's nobody there that will be annoyed by taller, denser buildings in this area.
But that's what you've got already.
We have some, but you can do more.
Yeah, but the owners don't want to do anything to stop it.
Are you saying that
So
to
I'm
separate those two
wondering if this
R4s?
R4 should be treated differently than the R4 that's on the other side of Mount
The
Mass.
southern arm.
You're saying split it and make an R8?
Whatever, R4A or whatever. I
Yeah.
just think this is an opportunity to really give density without people,
Well, just so the board knows, when that was approved in the sixties, there's two other buildings approved.
right,
Well, the same, the Rubin
Six
came,
or
when it came
seven
in.
stories high.
yes.
And they chose not to build at that point, and then the hazard regs came out. So originally, that was envisioned for what the Madam Chair was saying, that if you look around there, it's so far removed.
I mean, that's an ideal
I
spot
have
to do that.
no objection, but I'm telling you that I can't tell you. I can. The south of Brookside, because it's hidden, it goes underwater quite often. Because it would have to be podium built, you would want a higher building which would be consistent with what's across the street more than what's opposite on the same street.
Yes, but I'm just saying, I
she-
think we're worried about density at that point, but I think we can go denser and higher in this area, and that
Yeah,
might
you
be
said-
a zone unto
That's
itself.
not an argument, that's a recommendation.
Yeah, so I think if we
Run
can
a piece of
recommend that
paper
maybe
right now.
gets a look at as a separate zone where it can, since it's owned by the same people right now, it can be someplace where they can go denser and higher without much of an impact on any neighborhoods.
Right.
So, I don't know, we can call it R4A or whatever you want to do, but I think maybe that
That'd
needs to be a
that'd
zone.
be an additional ordinance.
Well, the others could be,
Yeah.
changed.
That'd be a fifth ordinance.
4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, I mean, it's not a heavy lift.
Character of the two sides.
They're very different, very different, yeah.
Would warrant that as a separate.
All right, and I recommend that the flood hazard language just says finished boil elevations for properties within the flood hazard as required by DEP.
Yeah,
Just put it on, just say as required.
Well, we've got something in there, Michael, look at it.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I'm just saying.
what we're asking for now is a recommendation.
yeah. So, so we've looked at R4 and R5. R6 did not flood, you're telling me that it did not flood, right?
Right.
But we just want to take a quick look at R6 because the regulations are slightly different there.
It's Orchard and Brown.
Yep. It's ordinance 2652. It's still dense, so I mean.
40 units.
Yeah, it's still
And
dense,
only 3 stories.
but the
I
coverage is
think
still
those are-
90% and 75%.
But that's what's there now, though. I mean, there's like,
Yeah, there's not a lot of in-between space in those.
it's, I forget what it is, but that's just saying, this is what's there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't, and 3 stories, so this basically is what it's
That's
there.
what it has now.
Yeah, that's basically
Yeah,
what's there now.
Whereas essentially, we're setting the stage for a rehab, not a revamp.
Right. Which I have no problem.
So the R6, this is already,
I think,
That's where it is right now.
It's already built up, I
yeah, no,
mean,
I'm
if
just,
you,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm just trying
I
to.
think right now, Madam Chairman, those are two-story apartments.
Yeah, two-story buildings.
Yeah, they're two-story. No, they
Right,
have a
but they
third,
have a peaked roof up to
Yeah.
3.
It's not 3-story.
No.
they have a basement and two.
So when we say 3-story, are we adding a roof peak or are we doing a flat roof 3-story
Could
building?
be an
Like,
additional
is there a
story.
Could be an
height?
additional floor. If it's rehab, then
So-
the third floor could be added if the structure can
So my
support it.
question is, do we want to do a height restriction rather than
Well, then you would make it 2
floors?
and a half stories.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. At 3 stories means you have a full height on it.
Right,
Third story.
so my,
2 and a half story is the whole.
right, so my question is, do we want to, should there be a recommended height limit rather than giving 3 stories?
So
3 stories can be 14-foot ceilings, 10-foot ceilings, I mean, like, play
Andrew,
with that.
this was my concern about the Kirby Avenue thing and the 4th story. So, I mean, if we're gonna make a 4-story area out of that, that's, well, Kirby Avenue's 4. and we're
Kirby's
using-
4, and that's
we're
why,
referencing
right.
Kirby Avenue here as a recommendation, so.
So that's what I'm, that's
So
why I'm
4
pulling
might
up
be
our
okay
6.
on one side of the.
Well, you could say a height of
river,
35
but,
feet or something like that.
3 on the hill
Well, that's what, yeah.
might level it out, you know.
Well, that's what I'm thinking for R6, because it is 2-story now, if we recommend a height restriction, 35 is the house height restriction,
Right.
right? So we can either recommend around 35 feet.
This
And then
is
they
3
can-
stories or 35.
Right, so then they could do a 3-story building with a flat roof, if they wanted to, right?
Is-
So,
So the way it's ran here is 3 stories, 35 feet. They have to comply with both of those?
yes.
Yeah.
So then it is that.
But if you've got a 4-story building and we're only getting density of 20 roughly, and we cut that down, you're not gonna get the same.
Well,
density, and
so
then
on
property's
R6
not
right
gonna
now,
be
so we're looking at just R6.
R6 is a 3-story.
And so
Oh,
that's,
oh,
that's
okay,
a
I'm
separate,
sorry, I'm
that's
sorry.
a separate
Okay.
reg. So I
Yeah.
think as long as,
I apologize,
as long
I
as
was
it's held to
thinking,
the
yeah.
35 feet, or, I mean, give them a little bit if they needed to do a 3-story building.
3-story building, 35 feet.
Yeah, that's what it has here.
Well, that's typical.
Well, that's really 2.5 stories, that's what Mike and I were saying. They could do a 3-story flat roofed building.
I mean, if the stories comply, but the height doesn't, it's a C variance, it's what we do.
And we can approve it. So if it's a flat roof and they need another 3 feet or something for a
And
parapet.
we've got
we can approve that.
other areas where we say 3 stories, 35 feet.
So
I'm okay with that with the 35.
yeah, so, and I think basically it's what's there now. If you've ever driven by there, it's just block housing and parking.
Yeah.
So if you're okay with that, then we'll just leave R6 as it is. Look at that, Tom.
R6
See?
is already at 40 units. This is the existing, right?
I don't know what it's at, because I couldn't get that number. I was with the R4 and the R5, the R6, I don't know.
But it,
We have that.
That's
it's
definitely.
probably less because they're allowing
That's-
3 stories and there's only 2 stories there now. So
Yeah.
this is probably higher than what's there now.
But the impervious coverage right now is at 90%.
Yeah, it's parking and buildings, I don't think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's gotta be close to that
Yeah.
there.
What Colin is saying is right
That
now,
one's gotta be
it
close.
says the maximum improvement coverage is 50%, but what Colin's proving out is, this was written after they were built.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
If you drive by that site, it is
It's
block
concrete.
housing and parking.
Right.
Yeah, there's nothing.
That one's tight.
I'm saying the construction office has these numbers.
Yeah.
I just got taxed with it, Dave.
No.
I already had that, I
No,
didn't have
my fault.
R6.
It may not be 90, but it's gonna be a lot
I think
higher
it's,
than
I
the
think it's
others.
more of a height thing, that you just don't want something looming up over those houses, and I think our concern right there. All right, and then there's R7, which,
What?
look, and we can set that as, we had a proposal for that site a while back, if I remember correctly.
Well,
And-
we had a concept which we gave back to them and said,
No way.
right.
So I think, I'm happy with just saying Kirby Avenue there too, I think.
Right.
Match that with the R4 and 5?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So I understand this, we got language talking about affordable housing on the different units.
yep,
We have an idea to split off Oak Terrace, to put more density there.
right. Is that what, that's the
That's
R4,
the R4
All
split
that
now.
R4.
Yeah.
The rest of the zones, with the exception of the R6, do similar density as Kirby Avenue.
Yep.
And then R6, we're basically saying leave the language alone as it's written.
Yep.
But, I'm sorry, make it 3 stories, 35 feet.
That's what it is.
That's what it's written as right
Okay.
now, so yeah, so basically you're fine.
Right.
You're fine.
Okay.
That's Cliff Street.
That's Brook Street?
Yeah, that's good. Remember they came in with the housing proposal for Cliff Street where there was,
Well,
they
it was
raised
a
the whole
committee,
thing up
they,
on
or it
a.
may not have been to the full
Yeah.
planning
I
board.
thought it was to the whole
No.
thing.
No, that was
So that's gonna be 5 stories or 60 feet, the R7?
No, we're
No,
gonna say
no,
Kirby Avenue.
Kirby Avenue.
Kirby
Okay.
Avenue.
Okay.
That's
We're
gonna be
basically
the
saying Kirby Avenue is similar standard to Kirby Avenue, everything with the exception of the R6.
Now, that's going to have to be built on a podium,
The whole
Yeah.
site.
the whole site.
Oh, the R7?
The-
R7, yes.
Either that, or it'll never get DEP permit.
Yeah, you have to be at least.
Simple.
And that's what I'm saying, I'm a little,
Well, that's where we had a discussion about, well, that's when we had a discussion about should anything be built on that site and should that density end up over in another place. And that's something that,
which one, the R7?
yeah, because the whole thing floods.
I think if it's safe for people, right, isn't it? Wouldn't
Well,
it be the
when they
developer's
build it
risk?
up, what happens is when they build it up on a platform,
Yeah.
you have, all around you have regular houses that are
Mm.
have now this
Great.
platform, giant building kind of around them. And so, it's really out of scale to what's in that neighborhood. And so that was our
That's what you're saying.
objection, that, to the proposal.
Well, other than the fact that it was ugly.
It'll look prison, it literally.
I don't think I saw that
It'll
one, I
look
think
like
that was before me.
It looked like a
No,
prison.
It didn't come to us.
It did. It didn't
Oh,
get this
okay.
far because we went,
Look,
it looks like prison.
it was that good, huh?
It wasn't good. So, and it was, yeah, so.
It
I-
also included underground
Yeah.
parking.
it-
Well, no, it was under the podium.
It was
part.
under the podium
Still
parking,
was-
but it was
still
a
was-
massive building site where there are houses still,
Right now.
all around it, yeah. So it just didn't fit very well.
Well, put it into perspective, the houses on Grove Street are offices.
But now they're turning back to residential.
Anyway, well,
So we just
keep-
approved
keep-
that.
Keep thinking.
Scale-wise, they're
On the
houses.
north side of Cliff Street.
You have the small garden, the
small
small townhouses turned sideways.
And a few houses, but not a lot.
But we have,
If he builds on a podium, he's got to do a lot of engineering to make sure that, A, the cars can get out if a flood is caused.
well, that's why I was thinking,
The whole thing is a very complex moving
it
thing.
is.
And in the middle of all of this, currently, there is a sanitary sewer line running under one of the existing buildings.
Right.
That predates the building.
Well,
Yeah, but they built on top of it.
right. So I think that site needs some creative thinking where it might become parkland and, we trade it for a piece of the landfill or something. That's my recommendation.
The landfill's gone, it's spoken for.
Well-
You've got nothing to trade.
When the solar field leaves, you can trade it.
I will be buried, no, I'll actually be in the moon somewhere.
Hopefully
So I
they,
think we just have to keep the Kirby Avenue, for that's gonna be a site that's gonna be just a weird site to begin with because of the situation.
Kirby Avenue.
No, this R7.
Well, it's going to take a lot of creative thinking to make it fit in with what the town is.
Yeah, and I think
And
that's,
I
That's
think
what you
if
said
you,
Kirby Avenue.
if you be preemptive with the density in that particular spot, you're probably shooting yourself in the foot. Personal opinion.
well, I think that's,
So, back to what Jason said, we get this thing moving.
yeah, I think basically.
we're only making a recommendation, again, I just wanna keep everybody on board, we're making a recommendation.
Right.
And and I know the two of you sitting here, they could ignore whatever we say and just vote on exactly this and say yes, they can take the recommendations, they can postpone it, they can do whatever. I just wanna make sure we get a recommendation,
And in the absence of seeing a concept plan, which is always
which is,
always
The
an
ultimate
option
thing,
developed.
yes.
Absent of seeing the whole thing laid out, this is what the planning board
Right.
recommends.
Right.
Obviously, if you come in with
Yeah.
a great concept
Then we'll,
and the density of whatever, it works, right? But I'm just saying.
This
that-
is to
Yeah,
give
and
them,
that's kind- and
this is
that's
to
what
give them a roadmap.
Yeah.
Right, right.
If
So I
they
think-
disagree, and as Mike said, they come back with something and you guys actually like it, once
We
you
are all for
put
it.
the defibrillator on me, we'll be able to get to it.
We had a developer propose about 12 years ago, a whole development in the Baker Taylor site. And then they came to this board asking for the board's recommendation to change the zoning to allow it. Concept was laid out. It was 4-story spec townhouses, and it was cul-de-sacs. And they came in saying, this is what I want to build. Will you change the zoning to allow it? And the planning board's recommendation was, this is not what we want to see down there. So a developer can always come in with a plan for the site, and you get a concept review and say, this is what I want to do, this is the changes I need in the zone. If the planning board likes it, the council has to, it's the council's call, but we've done this more than once. Just throwing it out there, Glenn.
So,
That's it.
I think, does anybody else have any questions or no? So, I think, Michael, if you can draft a letter with Colin.
Yeah. I'll
Cover
draft it to Kevin.
You're gonna cover the, affordable housing gray area,
Yeah,
okay? And then, except for R6,
right.
we're going to do the similar to Kirby Avenue.
And I'm gonna put the
numbers.
bulk stamp over right in it, so it's easy to see.
And then think about, doing the oak
Consideration should be going to maybe carving out Oak Terrace
terrace, thank you.
to allow for more density, given its unique circumstances.
And it's a perfect location for it in this town.
Right.
I just have a secondary question or just a comment. When I was talking with people from the environmental commission about this yesterday, they questioned increasing impervious coverage, considering everything else that happened. Of course, I said yes, a lot of things that happened to us a few months ago, a month and a half ago, were not related to anything that we can control in town. Of course, Bridgewater was development, 15 other
Well,
places.
it's a combination of things, and everyone's blaming Bridgewater, and
Well, I'm
I'm there with you.
It's a
But,
lot of building.
you had a lot of rain come down in a very short period of time.
Yes, but on the average storm, is it still wise to overbuild in the parkland areas or areas that, you know, like,
That's something to consider.
should we consider, or they consider abandoning the one that floods the most? Or in the parkland, do something else.
I'm not touching that one.
It's private property.
Yeah.
I understand that, but there's always, let's make a deal.
That's gonna require increased density somewhere else
Yeah.
then.
Well, yeah, well, this is that, what I'm saying is that
High-rise.
maybe Cliff is not the place to build anything, and it's gonna be out of place, be on.
I think the only thing to consider, and, you know, my thought process on that is, the owner doesn't have to rebuild, he can just rehab what's there and let it flood again next time it floods, and do the same thing that we just had.
And he.
So,
he bought the property-
he's never going to build a park,
And
let's
he
be
bought,
honest.
he bought the property knowing it flood.
Yes, he's never gonna build a park there. I don't think anybody, unless, you know, did you win the lottery and you wanna buy it and you wanna build a park there, you can do that where the town decides that they're gonna purchase. We can't tell a developer, like, you have an apartment that you
No.
can't redo the apartment.
No, I certainly
Okay,
understand.
yeah.
I'm just saying that if it gets tight and that's not financially feasible, and then
We go to that.
do something else, then we can play, let's make a deal, if they wanna do that.
But that comes later, because one thing you can't do constitutional-wise is consider price or
No.
finances.
No.
You're not allowed to think about it.
Nope, but we can trade. You can,
Well, that gentleman there and his board can trade,
yes,
not
the
this board.
town. I mean,
Negotiate.
We,
Let's not
we
say
meaning
trade.
the town,
Yes.
we meaning the town, so,
Yeah.
all right, so,
Do we vote on this?
yes, we
we
do
vote
vote
on
on it. So we, vote that the recommendations that Michael's gonna write up for us.
The recommendation, I just wanna make sure I have it.
Well, I think Jason should be involved, but
Whatever.
Yeah, please.
fine.
involve
But,
us.
there
And
are
then just
4, 5, and
circulate it to
7 that we want to define recommendation for a percentage of whatever the percentage is for affordable housing, defined by what affordable housing is. Consideration to match the density of Kirby Ave for those 3 districts. Splitting the R4s with an additional R4 at Mountain Ave, and then leave the R6 alone.
Yeah, so the area that, the split area is called Oak Terraces.
Correct.
That's what the,
I was just saying, is it just Oak Terrace?
well, it's
I come
outside
up
of
with lots
Mountain
and
Avenue.
lots there.
Yeah.
It's just-
Yeah, because I was just looking at, I know
Consideration.
Mountain Ave is a clean cut, I
Yeah,
think
it
people
goes
were
right
like.
through it, yeah.
You
It's
can
in
call them
that
out there
west of
because
Mountain
they've all
Avenue.
got, Michael, they've all got lots and lots and everything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
4 lots.
West
I just didn't know if
west
there was
of Mountain
anything
Avenue.
else besides that
No.
apartment complex in that.
So adding additional height and density in those lots of blocks, basically.
Yeah, I think that's where we can make some people happy and not make others unhappy. So is this a
I like that.
roll call vote? So we need to move? Did somebody move this?
What, did you open to the public?
Oh, no, I did not. So
Sorry.
we'll now open, thank you, Michael. Totally forgot. Open to the public, any questions pertaining to the issue of the subdivisions?
Yes, hi.
Hi,
Hi,
could you stand and state your name, please?
yes, my name is Julie Montanari. Last name is spelled Montanari. I'm actually here on behalf of East Cliff Street. Me and many neighbors were affected. You've probably seen my face at this point. You're probably sick of it, especially you, Mr. Sullivan.
Never.
You're probably tired of the same box I can stand on repeatedly say. But I'm not here just tonight to say the same old. We have questions. We want to know as East Cliff Street, because everything we're hearing is pointing, they're going to be torn down and we will be forgotten. And the main questions, as I've had community meetings and I've spoken to neighbors, is how will this benefit us in the end? Not just us, but people who've been there for 13 years or more. What can we promise will not repeat what happened during the storm again, that if people were to move back? Mr. Morris and Edward Properties has a lot of very angry renters who feel like our voices have been forgotten. Our qualms, our concerns, health concerns, the flooding concerns are being ignored. We want to know that if you were to go forward, what good will come out of this for us, that we feel okay to move back to Somerville, to come back, to live in these properties we are discussing tonight. What safety can you bring us? And this is the question, at the end of the day, we're all asking on behalf of East Cliff Street. The other thing is there are people in Mercer and some of the other sites that were flooded that are going, what happens to them if we do rebuild? Does that mean they're now displaced, just like East Cliff Street is, without any answers? Or will they have homes to go back to at the end? Will it be a temporary displacement or not?
Those are good questions. I think, go ahead, Jason.
So, yeah, I mean, just, and thank you for coming again. We've been plenty of conversations. I think, as Colin was saying, the idea is that if he's gonna rebuild, it has to be, by DEP standards, you can't rebuild anything that isn't raised up above a certain, whatever the flood level is, I don't know it off the top of my head. It has to be raised up over that. So that, from the flooding standpoint of saying what happens with the flooding, if this changes and they're able to rebuild, it would be raised up, and then in here they're saying they're gonna put I'm gonna use a bridge, I don't know the right definition.
We don't know what it's going to be yet.
A way,
Some kind of exit
there will be some kind of
from what I
way
was
that's
understanding,
raised up
something to
above
benefit
floodplains
residents.
to get people in and out.
There'll be an evacuation route.
Yes,
Right.
that's the wording I was looking for.
Pedestrian
Right.
connection.
Yeah.
But this board,
Right, the houses are on top
This
of
is
it.
all the questions they've been
Yep.
asking me, so this is like beautiful work.
no,
From
let him
here.
go, he's,
Yeah.
We have to Grove Street,
So that's,
there would be the emergency access.
okay, because the other concern I got is there was lots of elderly neighbors there too. As great and as fantastic this is, we finally have an exit plan after somewhere that's flooded for multiple years. Pat on our backs for finally using brains, no offense to anybody, but.
we can't go in, so I just want to reiterate that. I just want to reiterate what we're doing here.
Well, yeah,
So,
yes, but I'm just saying, as they're concerned for elderly neighbors, how in this, God forbid we go through it again, we have a what options do they have? Because I can speak from personal experience, and other neighbors, we were the ones finding exit routes for the elderly neighbors, we were the ones.
So I think
And that
this
was
is,
one of our concerns.
this
that-
is the way in and out. And at this board, you know, while we can't make policy on how people get evacuated or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And any developments now have generators, they have areas of refuge, they have that stuff built.
But that's the thing, and
When-
again, we had neighbors who were still trapped, and there was no good exit because of the water.
Right,
Correct,
so
and that's
the
what,
new-
anything
the
we
new
approve to be
buildings
built
It
would.
will be above that water level.
But again, even if it's above, you have the elderly who cannot.
Then you shelter in place. So
Yeah.
you're
Well,
sheltering in place.
there's two things.
Yeah.
You can shelter in place because you've got generator and emergency power. Part of that emergency power is powering elevators.
Yeah.
So if you've
That's-
got
Yeah.
elderly people that are either immobile or can't move around quick, or someone's got to come and get them, the elevators have to be of a type that can take a gurney to start with. And I would think on East Cliff Street, it's going to take the shape of more of a road anyhow, so they can get an ambulance down close to the
Right.
building to help.
And that was one of the
people out.
bigger concerns because of what happened. Because from day one, I've been talking to these people, I've been the voice, they come to me for everything, even other tenants in this
You should
town.
run for mayor.
Listen, I tried for write-in. Listen, I tried for write-in. Hope, I plan to campaign again, let's see what happens, but
You should have
God
said that
bless you
later.
for being mayor because
What the planning board can do, what we're looking at is,
Make it safe.
making it safe, making it feel like it's part of the neighborhood, so we just don't plop something down, that everybody goes, it doesn't belong here in Somerville, it's too. So we want you to come back to Somerville, but we want you to come back to the Somerville that you love, not something that's been overbuilt and kind of concreted over kind of thing. And so one of our discussions here tonight was trying to find that nice balance of having a density that makes it affordable to build those platforms and do those extra safety things, but not make it so dense that it doesn't feel like Somerville anymore. And that's what we're shooting for at this meeting.
I mean, these are the only questions I have. Again, this is why I'm here.
Well, I'm glad you asked.
And of course, obviously, we will try to make it higher. It's just
It has to,
it has to be.
if it gets rebuilt, and this is kind of why, and not to go back, I think everybody, you know, I don't want to speak for everybody, I think we all would like to see it raised, so it's not in a floodplain. If it doesn't get changed, and he can just rebuild it, we can't tell him.
There's
No,
only
not
one
rebuilt.
way he
Sorry,
can
not
rebuild
rebuilt. He
it.
can,
Only one way, and that is he keeps exactly the
What he
same
has.
building footprint that he's currently
Yes.
got.
so he can
That's
keep
the
it where it
only-
is,
That's
put up
the
new
only
sheetrock,
loophole.
do all that exact stuff, and in 8 years, we can look at it, but we can't stop
But
it.
that's why we preempted the
And
DEP with these ordinances by saying they have to be built above the flood level.
Which I can speak, I was one of the first floor apartments affected, I think it's fantastic. I'm lucky my daughter wasn't home, a small toddler with how high that water went. So I am all for that, it's just these are the concerns because just the diversity of people who live there, and I'm glad to hear you guys.
Stay involved, because this is an iterative process. This is the fastest any zoning has ever been
Yeah, go
pushed
to the
through.
council meeting on
Monday night.
We actually are, I don't know if you've seen the flyers in town, a lot of the Brookside residents themselves, whether it's from East Cliff Street, if they're able to sell transportation, whatever their situations are, some are still very tragic. We do plan to be here. Obviously, I plan to be there Monday, so you'll see
You won't
me.
get all the answers you want, you know that.
I know, but as of right now, I'm the one with the biggest
part of the
mouth, and they
process.
trust me.
Yeah,
Be part of the process.
no, it's great.
Be part of the process.
Yes, they're just relying on me to explain better and make sure that they're heard. And this is what I've been saying from day one. Either we stood on a Jeep and said, let me be your voice, and they're like, hey, do it.
If you
So
need,
here I am.
so like the drawing that Colin just did
Yes.
for you, you can talk to one of us on the planning board, you can talk to Michael Cole, and he can do those
No,
kind
he
of.
costs too much, I charge nothing.
We can do those
I'm gonna
types
keep
of
that in mind,
sketches.
Colin.
We can do those types of sketches if it helps you to explain to people what.
I will let them know, again,
And
after tonight, we're all in
Mike
discussion right now.
Mike and I can, are more than prepared, if you want to bring a group in here, we'll just talk one
You know
night.
what, I think that would be fantastic, because every community meeting we've had so far has just been, hey, this is our voice, what's going on.
Ask us
I
what-
think it's fantastic, especially because a lot of families have children who are in the school district that are now still in hotels in like Somerset, are forced now to pull their kids out of the school system that they've known since they were little, and they're upset, and they're going, where is our answers, how do we come back to home? That's all we know. Thank you.
We'd be more than happy to sit down.
I think that is fantastic. I
Colin
will bring it
loves
back.
me.
Is there anybody else who would like to make a statement about the ordinances? Okay, I will close this portion of the meeting. So now, would somebody like to move?
Motion to adjourn.
No. Would anybody like to move our recommendations to the council?
So moved. Chuck.
Second.
Steve Rosinski.
Yes.
Dennis Sullivan.
Yes.
Jenny Kabuda.
Yes.
Andrea Dare.
Yes.
Art Akins.
Yes.
Jason Frasco.
Yes.
Al Foresti.
Yes.
Larry Cleveland.
Yes.
Christopher Addick.
Yes.
Where we are.
Okay, everybody? Okay, I will now open up the meeting to anyone who has something to say that is not on the agenda. Hearing none, I will close that portion of the meeting.
Before we close,
That's the mayor.
planning board members are encouraged to attend council meetings. There's no question of quorum or anything like that, because it's our meeting.
Right.
You are encouraged to come as a member of the planning board and as a member of the public. I've said this for most of my 26 years at this table. It's easy to vote in an empty room. If there's no one out there, we interpret that people are happy with the decisions we're making. And this is a significant step for not just future development of the town, but for people's lives. We've got, 600 apartments in the Brookside complex?
Yeah,
So you figure it's
something like that.
it's 1,000 people. So, you know,
It's about right.
it's a big step that, that will affect.
We all talk to each other. I'm gonna be real honest, as soon as this happened, even previous residents.
It'll affect the livability of the town, the safety of the town, the mental health of the town, and then as a secondary, benefit, the economics of the town, which is of course part of it, but we want people to come back and feel safe. And, this is a map, a blueprint for what, the town would like to see. We'll have a crack at the site plans, and we want, if and when these ordinances are adopted and we start getting site plans, I would expect the same level of interest from the public, when we get to decide what really goes there.
Yeah.
Because right now, it's just thoughts, until we actually see what it looks like, and where are the trees, and where is the escape?
No, Larry will take over.
Well,
I don't know about that. We put that down over there.
We'll see the
They
big
were
road.
cut down.
We'll see how it
I
goes.
asked that.
Don't even get me started on
Yeah,
that one.
that's not this discussion.
All right,
That's
would
not this
anybody like to
meeting.
move that we adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
You were giving me an hour.
Show that camera. It was nice to see you.
That one is not filled in the